American who was on the ground, on the ground, looking up, and a missionary going like this, and a ranchero, a Spanish rancher type of person from the valley. And basically, it was, and I understand, very offensive to Native American groups or people that are still very supportive. And on and off for years and years and years. Take it down. Some people want to get rid of the whole thing. But other people say, well, just get rid of this. So you got the whole controversy. Historical, but how offensive is it? Everybody has their own opinion. It was finally taken down. Really, just about a month ago. It's in storage. It wasn't destroyed. But it's been removed. So it's like, wow. This monument, by the way, if no reason you would have noticed it, this monument used to be around the corner, by a corner of the old City Hall. City Hall collapses. This thing doesn't move a millimeter, a second, anything. It didn't move at all in the earthquake. Because it weighs 1 million pounds, I think, or something like that. But it was well built. In the 1970s, when they remodeled this whole area, they moved it from over there. There's a great remodel going to go on now again with this. The street's going to be closed, and it's going to be grass, and I think, sports fields and things like that. And I'm not sure what they're going to use this or this will remain here. I don't think they remain there because they'll be put in. So, anyway, that's our little bit of time. Again, 50% culture, 50% government. What we're looking at is some of the older stuff. This is one of the older buildings in the Civic Center. It was opened like 1917, 18, or what, 100 years ago. And this was built as our library, culture. There was library and little buildings around town. San Francisco is a fancy city now. We need our own big fancy library. So they built this thing. And it served well for 80 years until they decided they needed a new library. And whatever happened, happened. And they built a new library. And this is our new library. It's 20 years old. This is our new library. They tried to copy modern the old library. They kind of first class on the window. I think it's electrical. I don't really care for it. You can't see it. All those scales at the top of that building. This has to be all mounted. You take a look back. There's these lollipop things all across, and I thought they were telecommunications or radar or something. I don't know. Well, they're nothing. Just an architectural detail. Anyways, so this is our library. It's cool inside. It's a building inside, and I've never been that enamored with the outside. This place over here, so they moved. Everybody's over here, and this is empty. How many have been to the DN Museum out in Golden Gate Park? Anybody? Yeah. That's a new building. Very modern, very cool. The old DeYoung was from the World's Fair that was in Golden Gate Park. Again, in the late 1800s. It was a building that was never built to last. It was for a World's Fair. But it hung around for 80 or some years. But eventually, nobody from New York or Boston or Paris would allow paintings to come here on a traveling exhibit because there would be an earthquake and that museum would collapse and of course the paintings would be destroyed. So they couldn't get much going on. They needed a new art museum. They do their thing, they build this beautiful new art museum. In a corner of that old art museum was the Asian Art Museum. Some rich guy in Chicago gave San Francisco, I don't know why not Chicago, but gave San Francisco his whole collection of Asian art, like the largest in America collection. And so they stored most of that art because there wasn't room. DeYoung said, sorry, Asian art folks, there's not enough room in the new museum for you. We have a different, thing going on. Oh. Somebody said somebody to somebody like, oh, well, the old library is vacant now. Oh. This is now the San Francisco go in. It's amazing what they did. And I was never a big fan, I just wasn't that interested in Asian art. I love going in there for the Asian art. They take you through history and time and parts of Asia, and it's very cool. You just need some more business to it. So culture bunch of people, statue, whole library, and other Asian art. So that's in the government yet. We have government here, okay? And so behind me, this column thing is the first government building we're actually looking at. We have all levels of government. We have the city government, we have state government, and the United States federal government. This is a federal building. And I will call this the old federal building. Because we have an old federal building, middle-aged federal building, and a new federal building, all in the neighborhood. This was built in the 1930s. It has the columns. It's not as fancy as City Hall, but it's still got the ideas of the windows and the column. It looks official, kind of thing. This thing was from the 30s. In the turn of the century, 2000 or so, the government decided it needed to build a new federal building because this was antiquated, asbestos, no wiring for computers, etc., etc. And so they decided they would remodel it. Well, the market at that time that got very expensive. And they decided, that was their original intent, to remodel. They better build new, it's cheaper to build new than actually take care of this. So they built a new one. This was vacated. The city thought about it for police headquarters, but remodeling, this is expensive. The there's the University of California Hastings Law School, which is a block over here. And they were going to use it for classrooms and blah, blah, blah. It's too expensive. Somebody's going to do condominiums. Too expensive. So as simple as that, the feds built a new federal building. Well, as 10 years go by, they really could do some more consolidation, the feds. Prices went down 10 years ago because of the recession, and it was economically good. So the federal government remodeled this. So it went from too expensive to ever do anything, build a new one, but to build a new one, this is still a federal building, and it's all been remodeled. So it is still government, and it's the federal government, and it's the old federal building. We talked about the old federal building and the new federal building, and there's a middle-aged federal building. The middle-aged federal building is behind it. It's that tall structure that's kind of gray, brown, just windows, very 1960s kind of design. And the nucleus in San Francisco. Architecture of the 60s is not appreciated very much. The big building inside is very nice. And that's where basically the federal courts are. The U.S. district courts, federal courts, not state courts. The federal courts are just in this building. And immigration and FBI and all that kind of stuff is in that building behind us. These federal buildings are much more routine apartments. Some of us have never heard of, or we don't know what they do, but they do things. And so those are those buildings. This is more high profile. There's always a lot of trials going on here, and the television cameras are always here, taking pictures of whoever is in trouble or might be in trouble, etc. That's the middle-aged trouble. Before we're going to go across now. Where's that? No, 9th District Court of Appeals is over here, beyond the new federal building. You can't see it.
I see.
And it's a magnificent old building it was originally the post office. And it made it through the earthquake. I mean, it was burned, but it made it through. And they restored it 30, 40 years ago. And it's magnificent inside. You can take a guided tour of it, but you have to make an appointment.
Is that on the Palace Street?
No, it's on Mission, and I never can remember what numbered streets. But you can see it if you went right around. It's across the street this way from that tall new building. Yeah. asked 10 San Franciscans, what's this square called? Most of them would say Civic Center. I mean, you know, I said, well, officially, it's the Joseph L. Alioto Performing Arts Plaza.
Piazza.
There you go. A piazza, is it? Oh, it is a piazza.
Yes, that's
Or
piazza.
not pizza, but piazza. All right.
Yeah.
So, it has an official name.
People come here and do performance art?
They do performance art. They do demonstrations. We opera. They have huge screens, and people come here with their chairs and sit and watch opera or ballet. In San Francisco, not so much anymore. I was in the World Series a lot. People come here and watch the World Series. But again, it's festivals. There's all kinds of ethnic festivals we have. A lot of it's centered here. This festival I'm not even sure what this one was, but that's what we have. There's a lot of festivals sometime kind of thing. So it's very popular, well maintained. Under here was one of the first underground parking garages in the United States, about 5-6 levels underground. It's the most expensive parking in the neighborhood, so most of us never used it. It is handy. It is handy. So this is the square. This, I could actually pull those out. There's
Mayor.
He was a mayor, correct, Joseph Alioto. And he still has relatives here who run for office and that kind of thing. This is some pictures of what this place looked like some years ago. Yeah, yeah.
His daughter was on the board of supervisors for years and years.
Yep. She ran for mayor too, I think.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So, in the 1970s, people started complaining. I'll call them hippies back then, but hippies hung around here, and there were benches and there were fountains, and the hippies slept on the benches, and people used the fountains for things they should not use fountains for. Complaint. So they remodeled this whole area to the way it is now, to make it unfriendly to those people. Well, they made it unfriendly to everybody. Nobody hangs out here much, or has not recently. And there's no benches. There's no place to sit down. You know, they have, well...
Funny about that.
That's kind of an evolution that's going on. So they just remodeled these children's playgrounds on each corner, and they're really fantastic. They're amazing. And there's a lot of daycare places in the neighborhood and schools, and they bring kids over here to do that. You're not allowed to go in there as an adult unless accompanied by a child, which is all good. So this is the beginning of the big remodel. When they put some of this stuff in, they have these trees that you see. Those are London plane trees, P-L-A-N-E. They're sycamore, basically. And they're Paris. I talked about Paris, and we want to look like Paris. This is very Parisian. They trim them, all the new growth every year, so they're just nubby things in the winters. And then they're, obviously they're coming out now. We have a little market, snack place that's open. It's like a little building, which is like a big deal new in the Civic Center. And the tables have been put out. So it's a ever evolving scene to have folks use it and not just have, the poor folks that are down on their luck hanging around and all this. So it's just one of those human conditions that we have to deal with. So we're going to eventually head into City Hall. Before we go, this building over here. If you recall, or we had another earthquake, a big one, in 1989. And all these buildings were heavily damaged. I worked in the building. There's that tall building now. There was another ugly, like other federal building that I pointed out. Heavily damaged. No one was killed because everybody went to watch the World Series, because this was the first World Series game of Oakland and San Francisco. Big deal. And so nobody really was around here. We all went home. And the taller building there had to be torn down. It was in such bad condition. This building in front was built in the 1920s and is the home of the California Supreme Court. So, not the U.S., nothing to do with the U.S. government. Every state has its own Supreme Court. This is the California Supreme Court. What is it doing in San Francisco? Because the Supreme Court of any state is where the governor is, and where the legislature is. And our capital is Sacramento. It is not San Francisco, even though San Francisco, we're pretty sure, we're the most important place in California, but it's not the capital. So the Supremes were in various buildings around town, and eventually they got themselves to build here. Why is it here and not in Sacramento? Well, there's two states in the United States where the Supreme Court is not, state Supreme Court is not in the state capital. One is California, the other is Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania is in Philadelphia, which is not the capital, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a small town in the middle of the state. And Philadelphia, 1776, Liberty Bell, all patriotic stuff, okay.
And that where the Continental Congress was?
Because the justices in the late 1800s, are you kidding? Do I want to live in Sacramento in a desert, in a valley, nothing going on?
105 in the summer?
This is a sophisticated place. This is where judges, justices, lawyers belong. It's where it's cool, you know. So they were very insistent that they stay in San Francisco. So this is the headquarters of the Supreme Court. They also have headquarters in Los Angeles and in Sacramento, but this is kind of home. And so that's where a lot of us work, because we work with the Supreme Court. So that ugly building was torn down. All these buildings had to have restoration to them. They built this newer tall building, which is offices for the Supreme Court and the California court system. Architects like that building, not so much because of the building, but it covers. We don't have to look at the ugly federal building that's behind it. So I don't know if it's a left-handed compliment or something like that. But anyways, it's been very popular. So the Supreme Court still stays there. Over here on this side, it's the oldest building practically in the whole Civic Center. That's the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. It was our original convention center. It was built as part of the 1915 World's Fair in San Francisco, most of which was out by the bay and in the bay, out by the bay in the Marina District, which is a beautiful, fancy neighborhood now. This was built away from all that because they were going to keep it. So it was built to last. It wasn't just a pretty building that was made of plastic. It was going to fall down. So we still have little things going on there. We have a Moscone, huge convention center downtown, which is where all the conventions are. Before we get too close, someone asked, that's gold. That gold on top of the building. All these buildings in the earthquake of '89, afterwards I'm not going to be technical about it at all, but they dug kind of like moats, holes around the buildings to separate the buildings from all the dirt, earth around it. And then they raised these buildings. City Hall, they raised it by 3 or 4 inches, the whole building. How did they do that? They raised the building and put, not technical terms, giant springs under the building. So when, not if, when we have our next big earthquake, we'll all go like this rather than like this. Because when you go like this, you break. But when you kind of go, ooh, you get a little seasick, but hopefully the building isn't going to fall. Time will tell. There's no earthquake proofing. There's earthquake resistant. So they did that to all these buildings. That building was gutted. Beautiful tile, chandeliers, they stored it all away. All that was left was the four walls. Put in big beams and supports. I like shock absorbers in our cars that are going to take them in. That's another part. So anyway, that's what happened to all these buildings, including City Hall, which is behind us. And we'll talk more about that.
Well, 72.
Before we start to go across the street and go inside, if you look around, this is a pretty tall building. And it was built in 1917, 15, 16, 17. Aside to that, there is a federal law that says no state capital can be taller than the United States Capitol in Washington. And okay, and I'm not quite sure if that's been adhered to, but anyways, that was a thing. Well, the builders of this thing put that filial up on top of the dome, that big thing on top of the dome. This building is 14 inches higher than the U.S. Capitol in Washington. Well, one, we're not a state capital, we're a city hall. So that law didn't really apply to this particular building. But somebody had a big ego and they wanted to make it taller. Now I have said, like, what? I think the U.S. Capitol is taller than this. It certainly looks taller. And I think, well, the picture we're used to, the place we go when we go to Washington is on the mall, the National Mall, which is a big water lagoon and this. And we're not at the front of the Capitol building. We're kind of behind it. And we're below ground level. So we're seeing 2 or 3 basements worth of the building. And then we see it up high.
Doesn't
you
it
go
sit
around
on
the other side of the U.S. Capitol, it's not a huge building.
Doesn't it
looks
sit
much
on
bigger
Capitol Hall
on the
Hill?
other side. What's that?
Doesn't it sit on Capitol
It
Hill?
does sit on Capitol Hill. I mean, that would be I'm pretty sure. Or that's just a name they use for that. But I think it does actually literally sit up
Yeah,
high.
it's a little,
but
yeah.
it's on a hill, so it's like if you have your house and you only see 1 story, but there's 3 stories below your house because it's on a hillside. Anyways, we are taller than the U.S. Capitol. I guess that's a wonderful thing. I don't know. That's all right. One other thing, there's a law in San Francisco, no building within a block can be taller than this building. If you look around, there's some tall buildings, but they're more than a block away. They're more than a block away. So, go a little farther because we see the trees come out and then you can see that are out here that we haven't talked about. The building over the right in that kind of a plain Jane looking building, that thing very exciting. Built about the same time as the old federal building. It was built to be San Francisco's health department, and that's what it is to this day. It's never been anything else. It's the San Francisco Health Department. It just sits there and does its duty. And over here on this side are a couple of the newer buildings in the Civic Center. When we go in City Hall, I'll point out, it used to be the government stuff in City Hall, was it county government, city government, and the judges, the court judges, Superior Court judges were in there. And we see some old courtrooms. The plan before the was to move all the judges out and build them their own courthouse, so to speak. And it all got interrupted and part of the earthquake recovery. And so that building, the gray with the little dome on top, that is courts. That is San Francisco Superior Court. California is the only state that has 1 level of court. We don't have New York's terrible, really, has a million different little courts for this and that and the other. All we have is Superior Court, from traffic ticket to murder to huge robbery. Everything is in the Superior Court. So that is the civil division of Superior Court, mainly civil cases. Criminal cases are downtown, well, that way a few blocks, in a horrible, smelly old building in the 50s. You think that's ugly? The one over here is horrible. And they're going to tear that down and build a new one for that. Anyways, that's where the judges, so they moved them all out of here. But that all kind of happened quicker because of the earthquake. And they were moving things around. The newest building is the glass thing. That's the Department of Public Utilities of the city. And that's one of those new, very green buildings that I don't know, makes its own everything. I don't know. I'm not sure what they do, but it's all the air is recirculated, the water, and blah, blah, blah. So it's quite an interesting building, actually, to go in and take a look at. Then across the street, we'll just wait for the light. We'll go up the steps. There is security. It's kind of, I don't know if you noticed it, I think don't bring big backpacks and stuff because then we have to go to another door. But I think we're safe here to go in. It doesn't take too long. It's nothing like an airport thing, really. But you do go through a detector kind of thing. And then we'll just meet right beyond that. And that's where we'll start our tour inside.
Rồi chị thắp sư bà có đồ rồi em thấy nó có cái điện cổng đó.
Beautiful building. And we're going to go upstairs and around. What we'll do here, we're going to walk under the big dome. And it doesn't look too busy. But there are often a lot of weddings going on here, so as we walk around, we may have to go in and around some weddings, but I'll determine what we do at that point in time. It's a very famous place to get married in the San Francisco City Hall. Right where we are now, there's nothing really big fancy. The floors are nice marble that have these sandstone columns. So this is like, oh, okay, this is really nice. We're going to go under the dome. The dome is the fifth largest dome in the world. That's by volume. And I always forget one of the other four. St. Peter's in Rome and St. Paul's in London. The Duomo in Florence, and whatever the big the thing in Istanbul. Yes, those are the four bigger. How they measure that? It's a volume thing. It's not tall, it's not wide, but it's all volume. So it's a really impressive big dome when we go in there. We'll just look at it briefly, and then we're going to go into a room off to our left, because we're going to go upstairs, get closer to the dome, and see it a lot, different ways. So look, you can take pictures anytime you want to. There's no restrictions on pictures. So. We'll go into this next room.
We stepped into the state capitol in Sacramento one time thinking we was only going to be there an hour and a half. 5.5 hours.
Just to wander around.
Just to look at what all there was, things to see, to look.
There's a lot in this building, and they give tours of this building, just of this building, that give you way more information than I'm going to talk about. Right where we just started, there's a kiosk, and you could, so that's your choice if you want to do that. This is the South Light Court, it's called, and there's a North Light Court on the other side, which you should also visit if you want to. And I commented on the restoration of this building. It was needed; they needed to restore it. It was, I don't know, what would that be? 70 years old, 75 years old, back when the earthquake hit, and there were plans to do lots of things. Well, that all got speeded up. But one of the things that was typical of what was the problem was, as the city grew and as more people were working for the city, this was City Hall. And so they needed space. So at some point in time, they decided that on both sides here, these light courts, they would start putting cubicles for workers. So this started getting filled up with little tiny square offices. And they weren't those nice, pretty workstations we have now. They were plywood. And the maintenance people would come in and bring in some plywood and build, nothing that we're used to today. And this got all filled with that. got filled with a lot of other stuff too. There was something that everybody did who smoked. You smoked in your office. You just did. Well, you couldn't see the light anymore, evidently. They'd clean it once in a while, but this was covered with smoke, you know, on the glass and the walls and the carpet and everything else. And also, back in the 60s, this new invention came about called the electric typewriter. Wow, electric typewriter, which you needed electricity for. So if you had 75 people in here who all had their own typewriter, there were no outlets in those days on the floor. So the only lighting was where those lights are. So if you came in here, you'd see 75 cords coming down from the ceiling on extensions to your little office and your little office and this. And so, I mean, I never saw that, but we've been, you know, that's been described to us. So, obviously a lot of remodeling and restoration needed to happen. And what we see is this today. This room, for instance, is used for a lot of purposes. There's a lot of weddings here. You can have your reception here, but it's pretty pricey. But they have high school graduations in here. They have yoga in here for employees. All kind of citizenship ceremonies for folks that become citizens. They have that in here. So it's many, many, many uses. I'm going to give you just a couple, 3 minutes to look around this stuff, but I want to find out in the back where those people are. There's a head, a bust. The building that fell down in the earthquake, the big old city hall, there was a huge statue on top. Nothing happened to that statue in the earthquake. It was still up on top. The building was collapsed underneath it. It was still up there. Oh, well, of course, we need to save that beautiful statue. Big thing. So whatever they did, they got horses and they got ropes and they brought it down. And they got the wagon, the big flatbed, and put this huge statue on the flatbed trailer, horses, you know. And I'm not sure about the timing. They tied it all down. Well, in about X time, the ropes broke. And the whole statue rolled off of the flatbed and broke into 1,000 pieces. Not the earthquake, but just putting it on the flatbed. But the head was saved, so we have the head. That's all we got left of the statue that was on top of the Capitol. So, again, just a couple minutes or so, wander around and look some of this stuff, and then we're going to proceed elsewhere. Yeah. And there are restrooms.
Drama, tragedies, and triumphs. Today, City Hall seems like a permanent fixture on the skyline, but the icon we take for granted now,
was amazing. You all recall that it was our mayor, Gavin Newsom of San Francisco, that first encouraged and got going the whole same-sex marriage thing, 40 years ago at least. And it was amazing. We'd come to work, as I said, across the street, and you'd look here, and there'd be lines of couples out the door twice around the building. Amazing. When I come here and give tours, there'd be 40 weddings going on. In that corner, every place we've been and we will go, there were weddings going on. There's a small group of about, I don't know, 5, 10 employees here, but that's one of their main jobs is performing the ceremony. They were going on and all that kind of stuff. But back at that time, you could volunteer to do it. You didn't have to. If you wanted to, you could volunteer. So they had maybe 100 employees that, did whatever they needed to do to get permission and perform the wedding ceremony. So that went on for 3 or 4 months. It was just never ending. It was just amazing to watch. That became famous. And a lot of people around the country in New York, they all ended up married at City Hall. Which sometimes City Halls aren't very interesting looking. This is a really nice place. Married at the top of the steps. Just doing the whole civil ceremony. The ceremonies last 4 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. So, anyways, Marriage Central, right over the shade here. You can walk around the corner and we'll be able to see the whole area.
Sorry, bro. People look at it and all this decorative design. Like why isn't it painted? And, well, back in the day, you did not paint this stuff. It was enough just to be the decorative design. I taught, it's not a Sistine Chapel or anything like that. So there's not a lot of color. It's just this great design. These are all molded. These are not carved things. These are all molded. Some of them have like SF, the little garland, so it signifies the place to say, some of these big beautiful windows and you plant and you restore all that. One thing I find amazing is in the earthquake, the dome twisted about 3 inches. However that happened, I don't know. It just twisted. And in the restoration, they put it back. They twisted the whole dome back again. How did they do that? I don't know. But they did.
Neat trick.
What?
Neat trick.
Neat trick. I'm telling you. Wow. So all of this is restored back to its glory of when it opened in 1917, 1918. A lot of things were stabilized, these big urns. They have now gripping long rods in them, so they won't tip in the next earthquake. They've done all they can to kind of preserve it. And maybe when we're outside, if I remember, I'll point out the moat around the building is supposed to help the whole thing out too. But we're going to walk down 2 flights of steps. Everybody good with walking down. There's a railing and all that. So, and then we're going to go in front of the mayor's office. The judges out to the new building. Behind me, you can see where it says Municipal Court Number 3, I think it says. Those were courtrooms
they're now offices. But and they weren't real fancy, so it wasn't like some beautiful architectural thing was taken away. But all along those hallways and these hallways where those judges are, California no longer has a municipal court. There's only Superior Court for whatever business you have. So, this is the mayor's office. And this opposite the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors, some places have commissioners or city councils. Here in California, in San Francisco, our city council is called the Board of Supervisors. San Francisco is the only place in California that is both a city and a county. California has, I think, 50 counties. Los Angeles is a county, but the city of Los Angeles is just part of Los Angeles County. There's 150 other little towns that are all part of Los Angeles County. And here, we're the smallest county in terms of square miles. That's certainly a big population. So, in California, if you're a county, you have a board of supervisors. If you're a city, you have a city council. So back in the day, the people of San Francisco decided to have theirs be the county side of it, the board of supervisors. The county does not have a mayor, but they decided to have a mayor. So we have a mayor like the city. So we have these combinations. We also have a city police department and a county sheriff's office. So anyways, city and county. The mayor's here, the board of supervisors, we'll end up over there too. Beautiful room. But mayors and boards of supervisors often don't agree. So we always kind of go, hey, over there, we don't agree with you. They're over there going, hey, we don't agree with you. But hi.
They wave with all their fingers, right?
So this is where legislation happens. Now, always got to bring up briefly, it was a very sad thing about, it's been 40 years. Anybody familiar with Harvey Milk, with Milk, the movie from some years ago? Harvey Milk was the first gay, probably not first, but first big deal gay city council member in the country, in the United States. So he was a member of the Board of Supervisors. And there are I think there's 12 supervisors, I think. Anyways, he was controversial, as things are wont to be. And one of the older, not age-wise, but older days supervisors was Dan. Oh, my mind's gone. Thank you so much, Dan White. Dan White was on the board of supervisors.
The next police officer.
With Harvey Milk. He didn't get along. My understanding is with a lot of people. He was very conservative. San Francisco was changing, and he didn't like it. So he would argue about things and was unhappy about this. So he got so unhappy at one point in time, he came to the mayor, Moscone, who was in his office here, and he says, I'm resigning. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to get off the Board of Supervisors. Well, Moscone, of course, was delighted, because this guy was just and so handed him the resignation paper, and this Dan White leaves the building. And right away, of course, it became official and stamped, and this guy's resigned, okay? All right. Well, a short time later, I'm not remembering, a day or 2 hours, Dan White comes back to the mayor in his office and says, never mind, I'm not resigning. I don't know why I said that, and I don't want to do it. Well, the mayor's like, oh, sorry, Dan, you resigned. It's all over with, done, finished, sorry. Dan leaves the building, and this is a very short story here. Dan leaves the building, comes back with a gun, goes into the mayor's office, shoots him in the head at his desk, and then leaves and goes down over this way where the Board of Supervisor offices are. And I don't know, or I don't know if anybody knows whether he looked for Harvey Milk or came across him, because the secretary is in here and everybody had, the arm. The mayor has been shot. So people are pouring out of their offices. and he comes across Harvey Milk and kills Harvey Milk. And that's the movie, you know, that we have seen. So, and then he leaves the building. Well, of course, everybody knows it was Dan White, because everybody knows Dan White. And so they arrest him, and he goes on trial, and he's charged with first-degree murder, which seems like if you walk in and you plan and you shoot somebody, that's first-degree murder. He got off, the jury found him guilty of manslaughter. Much less serious. Somebody's dead, of course, but much less charge. Well, the gay community was very upset because they felt like, well, he just killed a gay guy, so that's not such a big deal, you know. Not true, because he killed the mayor, too. You know, so there were riots. I mean, there were big riots here in City Hall and around town. And, you know, just a tragic, tragic time. They say he did have very good attorneys, Dan White, because they got him off of what the papers have called, this is not an official legal term, the Twinkie defense. Twinkie. Basically, the lawyer said Dan White, was temporarily insane because he had too much fast food. Seriously, folks. But anyways, the jury brought that and thought, well, Dan served 5-7 years in prison, came out, and shortly thereafter killed himself. So it's a miserable story all the way around, but that was here. And so, these busts on either side of me, this was Mayor Moscone, who was the gentleman that was killed in 1978. The president of the Board of Supervisors over there, that person becomes mayor when something happens to the mayor. They resign or they die. And this lady is the president of the Board of Supervisors, Dianne Feinstein. She was just a wealthy lady from a neighborhood in San Francisco. She hadn't been in politics much, and I guess she was going to quit, move on to something else. Well, she became mayor. And, she certainly did well in the trauma of the city and in time. And many of you know she's one of our, California has 2 female senators. She's been long term. She just ran again and got elected. She's 85 years old now. So, she might quit pretty soon, and so another Democrat can get appointed. I mean, that's what they do. We all understand that. Anyways, she was, famous for taking over the city at that time. Before we leave, I forgot to mention downstairs, you'll see other busts like this. The city doesn't put busts here, taxpayer money. If you have friends, you have money, and you want a bust, and you're a mayor, you can get your bust in City Hall. I suppose if you were a horrible mayor, they wouldn't allow you to put a bust up. But one of our most famous mayors is Willie Brown. Willie Brown, and Willie is a character. Let's move on. Funny story is that one day, downstairs, and Willie was downstairs with all the other mayors, and one day I was like, Willie's head, his bust is gone. Huh. So I'm talking this way, and somebody pointed out, well, is that Willie? Willie got moved upstairs to the mayor's office where he used to be. So he's a very powerful person, and he got himself moved upstairs. And of course, this is Gavin Newsom, who was the mayor that did the whole marriage equality thing, same-sex marriage. And of course, he's now governor of California. So where his career goes, I don't know. So these 2 guys, recent mayors, in places of prominence at this time. All right, let's go down this way.
lots of more pictures going in.
This is just a magnificent building. And this was the opening day, and then over here. This is the 100th anniversary of the same room. And you get an idea of the colors, and it's all very rare wood that you can't cut down anymore and all that kind of thing. So it's quite the building. And you do see a lot more women in this picture than you do in that picture over there. Back in the day. So that's the Board of Supervisors. That's where the City Council actually meets. So we're going to go down the steps, the big fancy steps, curve to our right, and we're going to go out the back door. And that's where our tour is going to end, back in that area. So we'll go back. This is one of our main streets. When this
Van
was
Ness
built,
Avenue.
before this was built, this was an avenue of fairly new houses. Big, beautiful houses. Not mansions, but really big, fancy houses.
Merchants.
So we had the earthquake, and the fire started over that way, and the wind was blowing, and it kept blowing the fire this way. Point of story, within a very short time, a few hours, the authorities had to decide what to do, how to stop the fire, and they decided they needed a fire break, a place so the fire couldn't actually get past. So they, down here for about 10, 15 blocks, they went door to door to these big new, beautiful homes, told the people they had half hour to get whatever they wanted, and they blew up all the houses, all the way down the street here. Block after block after block after block. In fact, to some extent, it did stop the fire, but coincident to that, the wind changed directions. So instead of blowing this way, it came back this way. So whether they didn't have weather forecasting, so they don't know that was going to happen, but the fire stopped. This street never recovered in terms of being a fancy neighborhood. This is in the 06, 10, and it became more commercial, became apartment buildings, and there was this new invention called the automobile, and you had to have a place to sell automobiles. So this developed into block after block of beautiful buildings that sold 19, 15, and 20, and 25 automobiles. To this day, some of those buildings still exist with automobiles, but some of them are movie theaters and restaurants and stuff like that. So it's quite amazing. Again, the fire stopped, and you want old, before 1906 Victorians housing, it's all that way. And just street after street of, these really neat old Victorians. This is kind of the end, the last block of the Civic Center. The two buildings to my left and right are exactly the same. This one over here is the Opera and Ballet headquarters. San Francisco Ballet, San Francisco Opera, very famous. And they have their 2 seasons. And with opening night for either one, this place is festooned with fancy stuff and big dinners and la-di-da, and men and women all dressed beautifully and
pomp and
paraded across and all this kind of stuff. The building to my left, or my left and right, that is the War Memorial building. And it was built to memorialize the World War I soldiers. That was just recently restored and earthquake a long time ago. And this is beautiful inside. It still has the office of the veterans, war veterans, etc. But has museums. It has.
We're going down the road. Thank you.
Let's go. Beyond the ballet opera house, the trees come out in bloom, and it's hard to see. We've got a curved front building, That's the San Francisco Symphony. That's Symphony Hall. That was built on a high school football field in about 1981 or 82, somewhere in there. And it's a beautiful building inside, and the San Francisco Symphony is quite famous. So that is their particular headquarters. On the other side here, goodness, can't see it at all. There's another curved front building. Rather ugly, it's a state office building. It has the big seal of California on the front of it. So that's the ending, really, of the Civic Center and how we've grown. There's talk about expanding it a little bit someday. You know, that's certainly may happen. Ballet and other, there's little boutique hotels and stuff on the other side over there. But that is the history of our Civic Center. That is the end of the tour. And this is where I pull out yellow envelope and get up.